Good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome into the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home for the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion Los Angeles Sparks. Coming with your folks on Wednesday night, March 18th, 2015. Had a couple of days off again, of course, as we were taking care of a few things, of course. With other folks, welcome into tonight's edition of WNBA 365, again bringing you all the off-season buzz and hype across the WNBA. Joined here tonight, folks, in the Google Hangout by Chris Mancy from the NR Studios up in Anaheim, California. Cal McClure joining you here from Studio 171 in San Diego. Wow, Chris, last week we were trying to get into the Hangout, and then, well, right now you got in here again after we've been dealing with those technical problems, man. Other than that, though, man, how's it going?
Good, and I just found out, dog, you sent me the wrong link.
Well, at least I can screw up once, but at least I picked the postseason right for the WNBA last year. So we'll get that worked out next time, man, because I know there's a lot going on. I mean, we haven't been here for so long, so of course we're going to naturally forget a few things. Of course, folks, the Los Angeles Sparks are looking to break barriers and break records when they host the San Antonio Stars on Saturday or Sunday, August 30th of this season. At 2 o'clock p.m., the Sparks will look to break the WNBA record the WNBA record for attendance, with over 22,000 women there at the game. So, to find out more information about the We Are LA campaign, please log on to LASparks.com for more information about that game against Sparks and Stars, with 22,000 women there to break the WNBA record for in-game attendance. Find out more at LASparks.com. Chris, quiet on the WNBA home front today. One move made by Los Angeles today. Other than that, not much else has really been happening across the WNBA in regards to any sort of other movement today, other than just the one minor move today where the Sparks again today re-signed Jantel Lavender to a contract. Reported, Chris, at about 1 o'clock this afternoon when I roll off the rack, but Chris was barely made official by the Sparks about an hour ago. The press release here, courtesy of LASparks.com. The Los Angeles Sparks have re-signed center Jantel Lavender, according and confirmed by Executive Vice President GM Penny Toller, announced today. Per team policy and per every WNBA team policy, terms of the deal were not disclosed. Brian Agler, Sparks head coach, says we are very excited that Jantel is returning to the Sparks to continue her career. She is a player who has greatly improved throughout her WNBA days and has proven ability to play at an all-star level. She'll be a great significant contributor to the future successes of the Sparks, and I'm looking forward to seeing Jantel continue to grow as a player, close quote. Of course, Lavender was selected 5th overall by the Sparks in the 2011 WNBA draft, has played an increased role in each of her 4 seasons in LA. Last season, she started a career-high 27 games and posted career bests of 12 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists in over 28 minutes played. She had 4 double-doubles this year, 2 of which came from consecutive career-high 13 rebound games on June 19th versus Tulsa, and in the following game on June 22nd versus San Antonio. Her career averages of 7.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 18.6 minutes per game, along with 135 career games and 34 starts, and ranks second in Sparks history in field goal percentage at .513 among all qualified players. She heads into the 2015 season with a streak of 106 consecutive games played. That ranks 5th in LA Sparks franchise history. Well, Chris, I'll tell you what, man. I know that there's been a lot of uncertainty, Chris, and a lot of, some concern by the fan base about, okay, are you going to re-sign Lav? What's the story here? Because, Chris, there's been a lot of, as we said, man, a lot of moves made, particularly, Chris, the international players coming over that we really have no knowledge about. Other than that, this is Brian Agler's team, Chris, and he goes heavy on the international foreign imports. So, Chris, important, though, man, the Sparks locked up Beard last week. But, of course, Chris, today, though, locking up Jantel Lavender because, Chris, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions, a lot of confusion. But more so, Chris, a lot of almost panic mode, Chris, about Lav staying or going because, Chris, she's been a proven player for Los Angeles since, being drafted. Being that bench player, Chris, for 2 years, and now, Chris, being a starter at center, Chris, your thoughts about today's move that was, again, Chris, confirmed at 1 o'clock this afternoon, but not made public until 9 o'clock tonight, an hour before the show. Chris, your thoughts about Lav staying in Los Angeles and furthermore to go for it?
Just a very great re-signing by the Sparks, re-signing Jantel Lavender. just great for the post and just great move for the Sparks.
Now, Chris, that led me to my pre-show or pregame, if you want to say that. I'm a former athlete, so I can say pregame. But our pre-show roster update. Now, Chris, now that LA has re-signed Beard, re-signed Lavender, Wiggins has gone off to New York, Chris, there's only one free agent left on the Sparks roster as of right now at 10 o'clock in the evening here in San Diego and in Anaheim, or wherever you may be joining us from here on LAS 65. And, Chris, that is Sandrine Gruda. Now, Chris, there's been a lot about Gruda possibly not returning after last season, Chris. I think, man, it's a combination, Chris, of, her having a bad season, yeah, but also, Chris, when you have so much success, though, playing overseas, and as opposed to coming back or coming to the States, Chris, you seem to have a better rhythm, and you're more in a constant flow, Chris, where, last year just wasn't the best of the seasons for Gruda, Chris. And I've had a lot of people, from fans to reps, Chris, say, Gruda's sort of on the bubble, man. So it wouldn't surprise me if she came in for camp, but the Sparks let her go, perhaps, because there's only a certain, you can only feel a certain way about, you only perform well, I guess, Chris, when you're in a comfortable state of mind. And I guess, Chris, with her being overseas after playing with Connecticut for a few years, man, and she got comfortable though playing over there, where she comes back, Chris, and things just don't really work out well. Chris, what are your thoughts, perhaps, for Sandrine Gruda's future in Los Angeles for 2015?
Probably her days in LA are probably done.
Chris, I'm not. They might be. I mean, they're probably numbered. Is all I can say right now. Is they're probably numbered because she didn't really have the success she was looking for last season. I think she just again not having that not being in that right rhythm, I guess. Where you're in a constant flow, man, and things just really didn't click well for Gruda coming off the bench last season. So I mean, hey, if she does stay, she does stay. If not, if not. But again, folks, bigger news, though, today. The Sparks in re-signing Jantel Lavender to a contract today worth no money right now. Again, folks, it's been undisclosed again, where the Sparks, again, cannot or no one can really tell you what's going on. But again, the Sparks are re-signing Jantel Lavender today to a contract a couple days after re-signing Elena Beard to contract deals. Now, Chris, right now, the current Sparks roster goes as follows here, per the site right now. It goes Freya Abdi, Alina Babkina, Elena Beard, Anna Dubovic, Nikki Green, Sandrine Gruda, Jennifer Hampson, Jantel Lavender, Emily Nugent, Nneka Ogwumike, Candace Parker, Aaron Phillips, Chrissy Tolliver, and Mariana Tolo. Current roster right now for the Sparks at this point in time. And Chris, I guess, man, going forward, it's sort of what Chris have been saying. What about Jen Hampson? And Chris, that, man, that when LA signed her, that is not really guaranteeing her a roster spot, Chris. But I think, man, it's a completely different roster, man. I think one of my friends on Instagram today, Chris, they were posting projected lineups for the 2015 season. And all she had to say, Chris, was the Sparks 2015 starting five, confusion. Because Chris, even I don't even know who's going to be starting next season, man, because you can figure, man, all of these new players coming in, it's going to take time to really see who's going to fit where next season. So we'll see what occurs out of folks to kind of catch up a bit on any other moves that were missed. Of course, also today or yesterday, but Tulsa Shock re-signed rookie Vicky Bogg to a one-year deal. Jessica Breland re-signing with Chicago earlier this offseason as well. So again, not really much else happening across the roster front right now with any moves being made right now across the WNBA. But again, folks, the bigger news, though, today, once more, again, the LA Sparks re-signing center Jantel Lavender to a contract this afternoon. Chris, again, there's not a whole lot really going on right now. Again, we've had it's been, Chris, very quiet ever since the real opening of the floodgates for free agency this upcoming, coming up very shortly. But Chris, I guess, man, the only other shocking move, I believe, which also broke yesterday, which really kind of, made me raise my eyebrows, Chris, the Seattle Storm part ways with one of their longtime players and former LA Sparkers. They parted ways yesterday with Tamika Johnson yesterday, who was one of the, last resorts for Brian Agler's team last season, who, again, Chris, has been a tremendous player for Seattle. Has gone across a few different teams. But Chris, I guess, man, it was interesting again because here Tamika Johnson, Chris, was sort of like that last resort player that the Storm really had because Chris, with so many injury problems last year, man. Any sort of thoughts or anything about you that may have surprised you about that happening? Because Chris, Meeks had been there for quite a while. Chris, with Seattle, made a great name for herself playing up there. But again, Chris, sort of letting that one player go that was your lone good puzzle piece last season when you had players in with injury. Chris, your thoughts about seeing Seattle do that yesterday, or what?
Just very surprising, and probably maybe since Brian Agler's in LA, she maybe coming to LA, maybe.
We'll see, Chris. I mean, we know that whenever a Seattle player gets waived, Chris, that instantly, is Brian Agler going to jump on her to bring her to LA? But Chris, see what happens. But hey, Meeks did play a year with LA in 2009, so we'll see if he does come back sometime soon. We had one trade, though, folks, also go down in the past couple of days between the Fever and Stars. This happened on last week, where the Stars acquired or sent Shanice Johnson to Indiana. The full releases here from the Fever from the Fever and Stars. So here's the basic, folks, the nutshell here. Fever acquired Johnson in a 2015 second-round draft pick from San Antonio, while the Fever cough up their first and third-round draft picks, as announced by Fever president and GM Kelly by Kraskoff of the Fever. And again, the Stars, again, folks, once more, but the trade, though, sends the Stars acquire the number 6 overall pick and the 30th overall pick in April's draft from the Fever in exchange for Shanice Johnson in a 2015 second-round pick, which would be the 21st overall pick, again, confirmed by head coach and GM Dan Hughes. Now, Chris, Shanice Johnson played limited last year with the Stars, Chris, battling injuries herself, as was the entire Stars team last year for a brief point in time. But, Chris, I think, man, that basically this sort of reminds me, Chris, of that Jeremy Lin trade to the Lakers, where you give up one player and you get draft picks or cash considerations. Or, Chris, the Stream Mambo 24 would say, Chris, they gave up a flash drive, a bag of peanuts, and a soda for Shanice Johnson. So we'll not talk much about that. But, again, the Stars acquiring Shanice Johnson, or the Fever acquiring Shanice Johnson from the Stars for a couple of draft picks. Now, folks, the Sparks also, by the way, did announce their upcoming preseason tilts. They are not going to be playing in LA or in SoCal this upcoming season. For the preseason, they'll be playing in a mini tournament, a 4-team mini tournament that'll be taking place in Connecticut at Unica at the Mohegan Sun Arena, folks, as the press release here reads. The preseason tilt, or the schedule here, folks, goes as follows here. The Sparks will travel to Connecticut as one of 4 teams competing in a special 2-day preseason event held May 27th and May 28th at the Mohegan Sun Arena. Being hosted by the Sun, the Sparks will join the defending Eastern Conference champion Chicago Sky and the Chinese national Olympic team for a 2-day doubleheader event. The Sparks face Chicago on Wednesday, May 27th at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific, and the second game will feature the Chinese national team in Connecticut. And then on Thursday, the Sparks will face the Sun at 4 p.m. Pacific. Now, Chris, we had this similar preseason format last year in Orlando, where we had Chicago, Indy, Minnesota, and Phoenix taking part in a special 4-team tournament at the ESPN Wide World of Sports down in Orlando. Chris, this is such a great way, man, to sort of engage the basketball community as the NBA dies down, Chris, to sort of get them ready for the women's season, man, where you have these 4-team mini tournaments or double headers, Chris, and of course, man, it always benefits out. It always benefits the people that go there. So again, folks, Sparks in Chicago, May 27th at 2 o'clock p.m. Sparks and Sun the following day, 4 p.m. PST. So, Chris, I guess, man, we talked about how successful last year's event was down there in Orlando. Chris, what are your thoughts about seeing the WNBA continuing to build these mini preseason tournaments, Chris, to sort of, engage the fan bases, either in former WNBA cities or, Chris, particularly in a case like this where it's in the city, Chris, with a very, very young and up-and-coming WNBA team for the future? So I guess, Chris, I mean, all I could say here, man, is, this, as we said last, because I think we said this last year too, was, it was one deal that those four teams last year, Indy, Minnesota, Phoenix, and Chicago, all went down to Orlando to play that tournament. Where, Chris, this year, not so much a tournament, Chris, it's more so just the four games, I guess. So, lasting thoughts about this or what?
This is very good, just to get the teams and players ready for the WNBA season.
So again, folks, the Sparks, Sky, Sun, and Chinese national team 14 preseason event coming up May 27th and 28th, happening in Unicasable, Connecticut, with those four games between those two sides of the story. Now, folks, right now we can tentatively set our two LA Sparks 365 host meet and greet nights, folks. They are going to be tentatively set for right now. We're still hammering out final details right now, but folks, right now we're aiming right now for the June 21st game versus Connecticut, and then the July 22nd game versus New York. So we'll have more about that later on. But again, folks, look out for our two LES 265 host meet and greet night. We'll work on those, of course, as we get closer to the bottom, as we get closer to the WNBA season coming up. Very so close, folks. Only about 3 months away from the first game when the Sparks take on Seattle at 6 p.m. on June 6th up at the Key Arena. Chris, as we said, man, again, it's been very, very quiet. I mean, we've had a lot that's been going on over the past weeks and months and everything else included. So everything else has been pretty much kept quiet right now in regards to news and other headlines here in regards to everything else included. Now, Chris, I wanted to kind of actually, Chris, go back real quick to what happened last Monday, Chris. And again, we came here last week when the Liberty had signed Candace Wiggins. Now, Chris, I guess, man, that, I was more so the shocked person out of the two here in the hangout here, man. Simply because, here, Chris, we said last time, man, here, Chris, Candace Wiggins, spent, every other day of the week, it seemed like, Chris, doing all these, events for the LA community, Chris, for the Sparks, ticket holders, Chris, where for some reason, man, as we said, though, man, we don't know, though, what really went on behind the scenes, Chris, that something must have went wrong with Wiggs and the Sparks front office. But again, Chris, what are your thoughts here, man? Because normally, Chris, as I said last Wednesday, man, normally when players go out in the community, Chris, that's normally a sign that they're either under contract, like if that was Candace Park, Chris, she'd be under contract. But in this case, Chris, normally if it was a free agent, that would be a sign saying she's going to be with the team next season. But Chris, Chris, in your mind, what do you think though must have went wrong though for Wiggins not to re-sign with Los Angeles?
I don't know what went wrong. Probably just out of the blue.
Basically, man, it is out of the blue because, it's something, man, that none of us saw coming. It was sort of like, as we said time and time again, Chris, it wasn't like we didn't see the ownership leaving last year. We didn't see the petition starting. We didn't see all this and that going on. So that's exactly what this situation was last week was, again, you weren't expecting this sort of move to happen. And when it did happen, it happened. And sadly, Wiggins is gone now, and she is now playing with the Liberty, and I will be seeing her both in L.A., and I'm going to be seeing her in New York in September when I go back east for a mini vacation. So at least I'll be able to see my homegirl twice out of the week. Now, Chris, one more story, man, before we move on to our next show, Chris. There was a tremendous article, Chris, that was shared by my friend Jessica and Chris, not my friend Jess from Point Loma, but from Jessica, who operates the DT Bun page on Twitter, from the New York Times, Chris, who had a exclusive one-on-one interview with Diana Taurasi. Again, as you folks know, again, Diana has sort of been at the forefront of controversy, as has the Mercury again for her again sitting out the 2015 season again with everyone up at arms again about the Phoenix Tank Job 2.0. But folks, there's a tremendous story that we're going to link you folks to on the Sparks 365 Twitter handle that really, folks, talks about, the entire reasoning of her not playing this year over here in the States. There's been a lot going on, folks, as we know with this entire story. It's something that I think is worth reading because, Chris, this story really, though, man, speaks volumes about playing overseas, Chris, but also, man, the struggle that these professional athletes, Chris, go through. Because, Chris, there are so many polar opposites that Diana brings up in the story, Chris, in regards to how they travel. The pay is one deal, Chris, but also, man, their travel, how they stay, where they live, Chris, because frankly, man, reading Chris, what what Diana gets to have in Russia, man, a private chauffeur, chartered airline flights, Chris, vodka flowing out of her nose, man. But Chris, it's more so, man, how much better the athletes are treated over in Russia, Chris, as opposed to the WNBA, Chris, over here in the States. Because, Chris, normally, man, pro franchises and pro sports, Chris, fly charter. They don't fly commercially across countries. They fly charter, direct flights to a city, man, lush hotels, yada, yada, yada. Where, Chris, over here, man, they have to do coach and commercial airliners, man. Not the easiest way, not the easiest ways to travel if you're a professional athlete. So, Chris, the headline reads, Diana Taurasi focused on playing in Russia where the money is. And, Chris, there's really, man, no better headline because we know, man, as you and I have said plenty of times, this is not a tank job. She is playing the season, Chris, in Russia, but also, man, getting that money in the piggy banks, Chris, because, man, as I said, man, and as she said too, man, this is a case, Chris, of, what will my future be after I do retire from playing pro sports, Chris, because she even said, man, I don't really have any other form of work I can do. I have a degree from UConn, but what's that going to get me, though, in the real working world, Chris? Basketball is my profession. So, Chris, what are your thoughts, man? I know that we've asked him a lot here about this entire story, man, but what are your thoughts, though, Chris, in regards to how I just said, man, of how polar opposite foreign play is, Chris, as opposed to States, Chris, where foreign, Chris, she's got a nice 2-bedroom apartment, private drivers, chartered flights across the country and across the world, man, as opposed to over here, Chris, being on her own, living on her own, Chris, and of course, man, flying commercially with a bunch of other people, Chris, on a jammed airline, Chris. What are your thoughts, man, about hearing this and Chris, also, man, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of, like, okay, now I see why she's doing this, Chris, as opposed to, oh, God, they're tanking again for Breanna Stewart next year, Chris. What are your thoughts about this whole entire story, man?
Just very weird and everything, but she has a lot of money and just ain't tanking jobs.
We've said that, Chris, plenty of times. I'm sure people are saying, no, they are. But no, folks, if you read the story, if you actually do some reading, it'll help you on the long run if you do a little bit of reading. And you'll see that this is not Phoenix tanking again because, Chris, there is so much writing on this story, Chris, because, man, as we know, Chris, this, I think, man, as we said plenty of times, is, this, Chris, can only start a very negative domino effect. If, in fact, Chris, the foreign teams start paying D, Candace, Maya, BG, Chris, they start paying these players, Chris, that much money, Chris, to sit on their, lazy butts and watch their games on television, the league is going to have to really do something ASAP. Because if this keeps happening, Chris, you're talking about losing your fan bases across the entire country. You're losing money off revenue, sponsorship deals, Chris. So, Chris, this, man, is only going to start a negative downward spiral, Chris, that I think, man, might actually be the other end of the league, Chris. Not just the Sparks leaving LA, Chris, but I think, man, if this continues to happen, Chris, where more and more of the star players, Diana, Sue, Candace, Maya, BG, all these players, Chris, that go overseas and play, and if they keep getting offered money to sit out, man, that's going to be the final, that will be the WNBA apocalypse probably, Chris, as if that happens. What are your thoughts, though, man, about if this trend continues in the future?
It's gonna be. I don't know if it's gonna go on around the WNBA if it happens around.
I mean, Chris, take into consideration, Chris, someone like me, that's going to go see Connecticut and New York play, Chris, and I think, man, that even if you came with me or not, which you sadly won't be able to because of a lot of reasons I have going on here, man. But wouldn't you want to go to a game, Chris, to see all the star power, all the star power and star players play? I mean, Chris, why do you think, man, I'm not going to the Phoenix game this year because Diana's not playing? That's the main reason why, Chris, I checked that game off and chose the New York game because I knew I'd see Candace Wiggins at least play. Chris, why do you think, though, man, that I didn't go see Phoenix this upcoming season because Dee's not playing? Chris, think about the fans here that have the season seats, Chris, or like me, pick individual games, and you pick a team, Chris, you want to see those players play. Chris, I'm going to a game in New York at MSG with my dad and my uncle back in Connecticut, and we're going to see Chicago play, Chris. We want to see Elena Deladon play. I want to see Wiggs play with New York, but also, Chris, I want to see these other star athletes play. I'm also trying to go to an Indiana game, Chris, to see Cadge play. But, Chris, why do you think, though, that most times you pick those good games, with Los Angeles, with Phoenix, with Minnesota, Chris, because you want to see the best players in the sport play, Chris. And if something like this with Diana Taurasi, Chris, pops up, that's one reason why, Chris, that'll be the first reason why people won't come to the games because saying, hey, look, yeah, they're playing Phoenix, but at the same time, Chris, Taurasi's not playing. Parker's not playing. Moore's not playing. So why bother going to those games or, Chris, even watch them on television, Chris, when those star athletes aren't even playing? So obviously, Chris, Chris, if you pay the money, or in my case, Chris, you get your seats for free. Yeah, I think that you want to go there and spend your money or get in for free to see those star athletes play when the time does come. Well, with that, folks, now that we hopefully got Chris in here for one show, we'll try to get him in for the next one. But if not, we'll see what happens. Sparks fam, possibly up next, folks, or if not, we'll get back to the two-man show record, TGWTP. Next show coming up next year, folks, on LAS 365. So if you are ready, prepare to send in those tweets, IG photos, emails, live Q&A, much more about it is coming up right after this timeout here on your 24/7, 365 home for the WNBA and Los Dos, your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks. More to come after the break here, folks. Be right back after this. Don't go anywhere.